Hi everyone. In this video today we are going to see William Shakespeare's Macbeth. We can analyze Act 1. I am Dr. Vinmayil, Assistant Professor of English, maybe Vanya Perumal College for Women, Virudhunagar. The first scene in Shakespeare's plays or most important one. In Macbeth also, the first scene is the keynote of the play. It is laid in an open, desolate place in Scotland, that is a Scottish moor. Three haggard old women, the witches, who are usually called as the weird sisters, appear out of the storm. The weather is highly foul, and there is thunder and lightning, and they make plans to meet Macbeth, who returns from the battle. And they shout all together, fair is foul and foul is fair. Scene 2, Act 1. It is laid in a camp near Forres in Scotland. We found King Duncan and his two sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, are waiting for the news from the battlefield. The battle was between Scots, led by the generals Macbeth and Banquo, and the Irish, led by the rebel MacDonald. He was supported by the Norwegians. At that time, a bleeding surgeon comes to tell them how Macbeth fought bravely and defeated the rebels. He presents Macbeth as the decisive factor, and from the point of view of Ross, the other Thane of Scotland, we get a remarkable picture of Macbeth as a kind of Superman, a fearless and ferocious warrior who is almost invulnerable. And we get a picture of Macbeth as a champion of right against treachery and a loyal servant to the king. This is the only scene in which we could find Macbeth as a loyal general. Ross and Angus, the two Thanes of Scotland, admired Macbeth as Bellona's bridegroom and Valor's minion. Now the king is very much pleased with the news. Just because the battle is won, the king is ordering the rebel Thane of Cawdor to be hanged without delay. As a result of the bravery and heroism of Macbeth and Banquo, he titled Macbeth as the new Thane of Cawdor, and Ross leaves the place to announce this news to Macbeth. Though the scene does not advance the action of the play, it tells as much as about Macbeth. The next scene 3, Act 1, is the second time the witches appear in the scene. Macbeth and Banquo are on their way to the king's court at Forres as the previously planned witches wait for their arrival. The first witch hails Macbeth as the Thane of Glamis, the second one as Thane of Cawdor, and the third one hails him as the King of Scotland. When Macbeth was wondering what is happening, Banquo could remain calm, unexcited, and self-poised. So he questions with some doubts. Without answering him, the witches responded, lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy yet much happier. You'd never become a king, but beget children who would become kings. Macbeth and Banquo are highly skeptical, but Ross arrives with the news of the traitor being going to be hanged, and also he informs Macbeth about his new title. Now Banquo begins to wonder whether the witch's prophecy would happen soon or not. Banquo is questioning himself, and Macbeth is planning for the next thing. He writes a letter to his wife, and he is thinking about whether the third prophecy would happen or not. Now in scene 4, the play meets its complication. It is the incident which triggers the conflict in the mind of Macbeth. It triggers the events into a tangled knot. The scene is laid in for us in a room of King Duncan's place. In the very beginning, we hear that Thane of Cawdor has been executed. Macbeth and Banquo now arrive. They are affectionately greeted by the king. In order to show his appreciation of the services of Macbeth, he decides to stay at Macbeth's home castle in Inverness. With that news, he announces Malcolm as his successor. Malcolm is the elder son of the King Duncan. This announcement kindles the vaulting ambition which is hidden in the minds of Macbeth. He reacts strongly to the nomination of Malcolm. His soliloquy or at the end shows that he is already thinking of getting the throne by foul means. Scene 5, Act 1. It is the most important scene because we are introduced now to Lady Macbeth. It is laid in Macbeth's castle in Inverness. When the curtain rises, we could see Lady Macbeth reading a letter sent by Macbeth. In the letter, Macbeth informed her about the prophecy of the witches and how the first prophecy got fulfilled. And he also informs about Duncan's visit to the castle. So Lady Macbeth is afraid of the noble nature of her husband. So she is making up her mind to carry out the murder of the king. She calls her husband as he is full of the milk of human kindness. In her soliloquy, we could find that with the valor of her tongue, she wants to chastise his cowardice, and so she could remove all the obstacles in the way to the golden round. So she goads her husband. We could see Lady Macbeth as a woman of iron will and determination. It is she who is going to goad him on to murder. So some critics call her as the fourth witch. Her soliloquy is the evidence for it. She makes all the provisions for the uh, seizing of the throne of Scotland. She tells her husband when he arrives about the arrangements to welcome Duncan and also the arrangements for murdering Duncan. She praises him as, "Oh, never shall sun that tomorrow see. Your face, my thane, is as a book where men may read strange matters." In the next scene 6, Act 1, the King Duncan arrived at the castle of Macbeth with his men and followers. Banquo, Malcolm, Donalbain, all of them have arrived with Duncan. Lady Macbeth welcomes them as a perfect hostess. When Duncan enters the castle, he says, "This castle has a pleasant seat. The air nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses," which means the castle is very much soothing to our senses. It's highly ironic. It is the dramatic irony. The audience, know what is going to happen to the king, but the king found it as pleasant to be there. In the next scene, highlights the conflict in the mind of Macbeth. Macbeth, in a soliloquy, expresses his unwillingness to murder the king, who is worshipped as the god. He alone on the stage reveals the agitated state of his mind. He argues for and against the murder of Duncan. First, as I am his kinsman, his cousin, and his subject. As a king, I am his subject, strong both against the deed. If I murder him, it is completely against both relationship. Then as his host, thirdly as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself? I should protect him from his own murderers as I am his host now. But I am bearing my knife myself. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels. He admires Duncan for his kind treatment of his fellow people, his subordinates. He is ruling the country so gently. He has been so fair and modest in discharging the duties. But if he is murdered, his virtues will cry out to the world. So, in fear of retribution both in heaven and on earth, he wants to call off the action of murdering the king. But when he explains it to Lady Macbeth doesn't want to let it go off. She explains the whole plan which could never come failed. He expresses her anger over her husband's cowardice behavior. So, with her valor of tongue, she, she convinces Macbeth to carry out this evil deed. She says, when you had the courage to plan this murder, then you are a man. You prove yourself to be a man. Just carry out this plan with your own hands. She just quotes his valor and makes him to accept for the regicide. Lady Macbeth's words screwed up some courage in the minds of Macbeth. So he says, I should give birth to male children only, for the indomitable spirit I possess is worthy of bearing male children. That means he wants to make this planned event successful. So he made up his mind and he assures she will employ all his powers and all his courage to commit this horrible deed. The scene ends with his assurance. Thank you for listening. Let's meet in Act 2.